Hello, I hope you've had a good week and enjoyed talking about and thinking about LGBT issues and LGBT equality. Thank you for those of you who've sent in questions, which I'm going to answer for you now. In the interest of time, I'm going to lump together some of the questions that are on a similar theme. So the first couple of questions are, what inspired you to get into the role you're in now? And do you enjoy your job? And what aspects of it are stressful? So my main job is as an HIV doctor. So I look after people living with HIV, and working with people with HIV, it involves working with a lot of people from marginalised groups or people who are discriminated against. So I've always been interested in equality and diversity and interested in addressing health inequalities. So when the job of National Advisor for LGBT Health came up, it was a natural progression for me to go for that. I do the job part-time, so I'm still an HIV doctor while also working for NHS England. So that means that I get to continue to make a difference on a one-to-one basis with my patients in the clinic, whilst also having some influence and making a difference on a national level to improve the experience of LGBT people across the NHS. So I love my job. It's really interesting. It's very varied. I get to work with some amazing people, so it's very inspiring. I actually have 3 jobs. I also work for a charity called the Terence Higgins Trust. So the only time that it becomes stressful is if all 3 jobs get busy at the same time. It doesn't happen very often, but that can make it a little bit stressful sometimes. So the next questions are, do you think we have come a long way from when we first started to talk about equality and change for LGBT people? And do you think we still have a long way to go? Why do some people fight their feelings really hard and try to be straight? And are people killed for being gay in America by people who are doing horrible stuff? So the answer to the first question, I think, is yes, we have definitely come a long way. This country is really different than it was a few decades ago. It's no longer illegal to be gay. We have the Equality Act that makes it illegal to discriminate against people based on their sexuality or because they're trans. We have things like equal marriage. So the lives of LGBT people are much better than they used to be. But we still do have a lot more to do. LGBT people still face unacceptable levels of discrimination, of harassment, of bullying in the streets, at school, sometimes at home, in healthcare, in the media. And it's also important to recognise that trans people particularly have a bad time. So transphobia is still very common. We've seen rates of transphobic hate crimes increasing. So yes, we've made a lot of progress, but we still need to do a lot more. And that existing atmosphere of discrimination, stigma and harassment is why some people find it hard to come out. It's about fear of acceptance, or rather fear of rejection and not being accepted. The fear of discrimination is why people sometimes fight against or find it difficult to come out. And we can make that better by changing society to make them feel more comfortable to be who they truly are. People being killed for being gay is thankfully very rare. You may well have heard of stories of that happening in America. It certainly also happens sometimes in other parts of the world. It's very rare, but it's a reminder that we still have lots more to do. A reminder that there are small pockets of society that still feel such hate towards LGBT people that expresses itself in violence. But thankfully, it doesn't happen very often. Now, the next group of questions are, has being gay and out restricted you from doing anything that you loved to do before you came out? And do you have any tips for coming out to your family? So for me, coming out has only made things better. It's never restricted me from doing anything. And in fact, it's improved things for me. I think coming out was a great weight lifted off my shoulders. It made me feel confident to be the person that I truly am, to be confident to have the kind of job that I wanted, to now marry the man that I want to marry. So coming out for me only made things better. I've been lucky enough not to experience really any homophobia, either at work or in my personal life. I've certainly experienced racism, but not any homophobia. In terms of tips for coming out, I think coming out is a very individual choice and an individual process. When you do it, where you do it, and how you do it is up to each individual person. For me personally, I came out when I was 18, in my first year at university. So I'd left home, which maybe made things a little bit easier, started to set up life on my own. I came out to some friends at university first, which also helped. I certainly built it up into something that I expected it to be a lot worse than it was. In fact, when I came out to my parents and my brothers and sisters, they were all amazing and really supportive. So my tips, I guess, would be do it when you feel the time is right. Do it when you feel confident to be able to do it. Perhaps share it with somebody who you really trust first, like a close friend, for example, to kind of practice it before you come out to your family. And try and believe that it's not going to be as bad as you think it will be. People who love you will continue to love you, whoever you are. Okay, next question is quite long, so I'm going to just try and edit it a little bit and then answer it. So the question is, I feel that whilst it's great that we are coming to accept and celebrate the LGBT society, perhaps we overdo it slightly. Perhaps by celebrating LGBT plus people too much, it may cause it to still be discriminated against. For example, if we were to overcompensate for the atrocities of the past, we could form a society in which we treat all LGBT people as special, when in fact for true equality we have to treat them normally. Perhaps by celebrating something good, it implies that it is less good to be anything else, and it may make people feel uncomfortable with coming out due to the great deal that we make about it, and might cause the opposite effect. Well, this is a really good question, and I get asked this from time to time. Are we making things worse by talking about it too much? Do we ideally want everybody to be treated equally and everything to be normal? For me, I think the answer to this is that we have to make noise, we have to fight, we have to overcompensate a little bit in order to make everybody equal. We've seen examples of this throughout history. So, for example, the suffragette movement in the early part of the 20th century and the fight for votes for women, the civil rights movement in the 60s and the Black Lives Matter movement now, the women's liberation and gay liberation movement in the 70s. They've all been examples of people having to be courageous and advocate and to stand up and be counted and to fight for change. So when one group in society is treated unequally, to redress that balance, I think we do have to make a lot of noise. We do have to raise the issues and face them head on. I think also the other important point is that when we're thinking about human rights and equal rights, improving the rights and the experience of one group isn't at the expense of another. So, for example, improving the rights of gay men doesn't take away from the rights of heterosexual men, and improving the rights of trans women doesn't take away from the rights of women. Okay, the next questions are, can trans boys access hormones or puberty blockers under the age of 18 without parental consent, and is it free on the NHS? The simple question to this is yes, trans boys and trans girls can access puberty blockers. Puberty blockers are drugs that delay the physical changes that happen during puberty. Those physical changes can be very distressing for young trans people, and going on to puberty blockers can delay things, give them time to think about what they want to do and what next steps they might want to take in their transition. This question may have been raised because you might have seen in the press recently there's been a judicial review of the use of puberty blockers and a ruling that said that under 16-year-olds possibly couldn't consent to the use of puberty blockers. Now, this ruling is currently being challenged and appealed. The situation hasn't changed while that appeal is going through, but if it stands, it could mean that as well as having medical intervention, young trans people would have to, or rather their doctors would have to get a court order to allow them to have puberty blockers. So it's a controversial area in which there is a lot of work going on at the moment. But the current situation is that you don't need parental consent. Usually it is with parental consent, and parents are very supportive of their children, and it is free on the NHS. Okay, the next question is, what is gender binary? So binary means something that is either one thing or another. Yes, no, black, white. And we used to think that gender was binary. It's either male or female and nothing else. And we now know that gender is a spectrum, and you can be male or you can be female, or you can feel that your gender identity doesn't fit into either of those boxes. And people who feel that are called non-binary. Next question is, could you please elaborate on how we could be allies for the LGBT plus community? This is a really important question, perhaps the most important question, particularly in LGBT History Month. It's important that everybody is an ally. You don't have to be part of the LGBT community to fight for LGBT equality. And in fact, real change happens with the support of allies. So to be an ally, you need to be kind, you need to listen to people who are LGBT, you need to be supportive of their views, you need to not make rude remarks or rude jokes about people from the LGBT community, and you need to challenge other people that do. It can be very simple thing to do, and it's something that all of us can do every day. By being an ally, we can support the LGBT community, and together we can make real changes to address the inequalities in society. That's it. I'll stop there. As I said, I hope you've enjoyed the week. It's been a real pleasure to be part of your LGBT week during LGBT History Month, and I hope you all have a good weekend, and I wish you the very best for the future.